space, see people face to face, and was sure that some of our really important programs we could not run because it wouldn't be intimate, people would be intimidated by the technology. And I say this, and it is stereotypical for me to say it, but I think it's reasonable that we really were concerned about our elderly folks that we were talking to, whether they would be able to utilize that. And while it is the truth that many were a little intimidated, one of our best programs we run, Futures Now, which is all about our elder population, right? They did fantastic. Don and I and Sean Bostic made a critical decision to go ahead and run a program we thought could only be done in person. And as many of you have experienced, it went great. It was just fine. Folks learned how to use Zoom. We laughed together, we cried together, all that good stuff. And actually found that people were oftentimes far more secure in their own homes and actually more upfront because they were more secure. So there were a lot of good outcomes through Zoom. At the same time, we've got to understand that the line, when we're talking about isolation, while folks can have that direct communication, there is also something missing when you're not organically in the space of people. It just is the case, right? So as we think about delivering equipment and software, the thing that we've got to keep in mind is, what is the real deal with that? Is that a true connection, or does it become a convenient excuse just to, communicate in narrow margins, right? It's really, really important we understand that we don't lose intimacy through that we utilize technology in a way that really enhances people's lives and this is the part of this, because this seems common sense, right? But not only is it enhancing people's lives, but people have the full ability to use it. And here's where I'm really going with that. If we're only thinking about hardware and software, we miss a lot of the functional points, because how many people, just by a show of hands, or you can blink your screen if you're not showing your face, how many of us, right, have updates and repair issues all the time? Right? About every 3 days or so, you get something across your computer that's like, well, this needs to be updated. This isn't the latest version, blah, 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 blah. I can't tell you how many conversations I and many of you have with families that were supposed to use a given piece of technology or an internet function, and they're having a problem today. And they say these words, "I don't know what's going wrong." Now, I've said that like 10 times this year, at least, right? I'm not sure what's going wrong. And the joke I use all the time is the one where I'm talking to maybe an elderly mother who's helping her son, her 35-year-old son who has CP. And I said, "Well, ma'am, let me see if I can help you with the problem." And I said, "Now, where did you get that computer?" And she said, "Well, my son gave it to me. It's called a Commodore." Now, if you remember, Commodores haven't been around since like 1990, right? So my point in that is we spend a lot of time assuming, right, that we just get people hard, we get technology, we drop it off and they're ready to go. But what and sometimes we train the individual, we have training for the person served, but we forget that they're supported. They have to be supported by mom, by dad, and by provider staff, right? So if we don't have a regular means of maintenance, updates, repairs, and training for people, not just the person using the computer, but the people around them, we look like, and I think this is really important, we look like those colonial powers that used to take over islands and then make fun of the natives when they would give a modern piece of equipment that would end up as some religious totem pole, right? We really look like that. We look dumb. Now, let me give you an example. I talked to a woman not long ago. I was asked to help get a piece of equipment for somebody that's blind, right? And so I was right on it. I was scurrying. And then I thought to myself, I should check in with her and just make sure that all the things that have been said are true. So I called this lady, and she's a wonderful lady that we serve, and she's blind. And I said, "Hey, I understand that you need a Braille reader." And she goes, "Oh, no, I have one." And I said, "Well, I said, let me ask you a question." I said, does it work? I understand it doesn't work." She goes, "Oh, no, it works." I said, well, help me understand then why I got a request for you to get. She goes, "Oh, because it's up in my closet." and I can't reach it, right? And I mean, and it had been up there for 6 months. And so this blind woman could not reach it. So she just called and said she needed one. Well, she just needed the one she had, right? As silly as that is, these are the kind of things I run into all the time, right? And so we've got to make sure that as we think about technology, we're really connecting. Now, the other thing that turned out to be the case is there were a lot of updated things that that woman could have technology-wise that would have been more helpful than a Braille reader in her particular situation, right? So as we think about this and we really start to talk about how do we enhance the people we serve, the families and our staff, right? We've got to think bigger than hardware, right, itself and the software that goes along with it. We've got to think in 4 phases. One is, and this is for our staff too, right? How many people, just by show of hands, find you hear the same kinds of problem with your own staff and maybe yourself? Me, right? Okay. So I just had a gentleman retire that's an amazing, amazing staff person. And through all this, it was extremely challenging through all those circumstances for him to utilize the equipment. We had all the equipment he needed. What he really needed was a complete, we couldn't just throw training at him. He really needed functional training. So that's the other thing that I'm really going to push today, is that it isn't just sitting somebody down in front of a YouTube video on how to use Excel sheets, right? It really is about making an assessment. So I'm going to recommend 4 phases of technology that I think are incredibly important, whether we're talking about our staff, whether we're talking about even allies maybe, and certainly families and people we serve. And it's just very, very easy, right? So number 1 is assessment. And by assessment, it's not a clinical assessment. Don't do that to your families and people served or even your staff. It just literally is what is it that we're trying to do here? So with your staff, what is your job? What would be most helpful to you in your job in terms of your technology? Even if the person says, I'm no good at technology, I don't really know, ask them what it is that they're struggling with, right? And what they would want to do. Just an easy assessment, right? Then and I'll come back to the assessment part because it's very important. Don't make it clinical, make it functional. Very, very important, right? Number 2, then we want to go to, the equipment, the software, hardware, internet, those kinds of things. What is it that we're really seeking to acquire, okay? And we may need help with that. I'm going to come back to that, okay? But first, I call them deliverables. It's probably an easier way to say it, right? Your deliverables. So assessment, your deliverables. Then training, and training again is not just for the person for whom you're getting the equipment, right? If you're dealing with families, okay, and you could even say if you're dealing with teams of staff, right? Making sure that you have the kind of that collaboration make sure that the training is consistent and that all the folks are involved. Now, with providers, it's a little bit difficult because you may have a primary staff and others. You probably can't train all your staff, right? But you can't, if you've got somebody out residential. But if you have Martha that's been there for 10 years and she truly is that primary staff that supports so-and-so to get on Zoom, we better make sure that she has some training with that. And we'll talk about how do we do that affordably and reasonably, right? And then finally is your updates and repairs. Again, I can't tell you how many people have what they need, but they can't utilize it because they haven't got simple updates and repairs. And don't forget security systems. Very, very important is you got to have, if people are getting hacked all the time, that is not helpful. And I just was helping a person served with that. And I was so proud of her because she has impulse control, but she had been hacked. So she had the sensibility not to use a brand new computer she got until somebody loaded a protective software on there. So I was real proud of her for that. So of course, and then a good example, I left in the original Windows software kicked in and overrode the program. So she couldn't use it for another 3 days till I get back out there. So anyway, all right, here we go. Before I go on, so assessment, deliverables, right? Training and updates and repairs. Does that make sense to people? Right? It's a very easy way for us social workers, right, to think about, hey, what are we doing? Right? Now, What's the reality in that? Here's what you don't want to do, okay? And I'll wrap up with this. What we don't want to do is provider administrators. We do not want to have our staff have to be those that are assessing. Maybe it's your program coordinator, maybe it's your manager. In our case, we have teams of people, various folks of us that are involved, SSA supervisors, etc. What we do not want to do is make our point people that are helping with the functional assessment. We don't want to have to make them experts of technology, right? That is not helpful, right? So for instance, let me use, and I'll say case manager because we'll go bigger than just our system, okay? So SSAs, case management program kinds of folks, right? We don't want to ask them to do all they do and be technology experts. That's unfair and it doesn't make sense and it's going to end up killing you in the end. So what we want to do is we've got to start to identify, and it may include paying for, but identifying a technical like Safe and Home, where we're actually having these conversations about having a vendor, Safe and Home being our primary go-to right now, where we ask them to be the experts so that we would come to like Mark and say, look, we know what the need is of the staff. We know what the need is of the person served. We just don't know what's out there, right? And we would like the most affordable means of accessing. And Mark might say, well, you need the XL modulator, which is from that little green guy on Bugs Bunny. And, whatever it is, I don't really care what it is, as long as Mark and I are able to determine that together, that's going to meet the need and do so affordably, right? And then, so once that's done, then it's ordered. Then we talk about what training does make sense for folks. And I will tell you, for many of our staff and people that we serve, what doesn't make sense is to sit somebody down at the generic Office package, right? Excel, PowerPoint, and Word thing for an hour and a half, for $100 or whatever it is. That is not functional for them, right? It just isn't. And so what we have to begin to do is to line out our training is, what are the functional needs of the people we serve? And for many of you providers, that's billing stuff, right? That's coding stuff. That's those kinds of things. And how do we do it in an easy way? And how do we do it in a way that they can access it 24/7, right? Because if you have to schedule your staff to do it at 12 o'clock on a Wednesday, well, you're going to have staff that have to cover shifts. You're going to have staff that are sick that day. That just doesn't work out for people, right? So we have to be really smart about that training. All right, we don't have time today to go all the way through more than that. What I'd like you to do is we'd like to come back with more on the subject, but think through those 4 areas over the next month and think about assessment, deliverables, right? Training, bigger than the person that's actually utilizing that, right? There's support people, your support team. And then finally, the updates and repairs. How do we make that easy? We have lots of ideas about that, and I will stop there. Does that resonate with anybody? My boss is shaking her head. Yes, which is always a good thing, right? But the rest of you, it's probably important.
That was really good. Thanks, Eric.
Yep.
I'm going to go ahead and share my screen here. Oh, well, welcome everybody. Listen, the way I did this, I know it said recruitment on there. God, I wish I had the answers to recruitment. But I'm gonna focus mainly on some goals for 2022 that I think providers should have, to be honest with you, including myself. So I'm going to be a little direct here. It may be a little off-putting, but the way the landscape is here, guys, is that, we're coming out of a year and a half where our whole world as a provider has been turned upside down. And we're having a hard time finding staff, no doubt. We have to make decisions about not serving individuals. And how about that? As a provider, we turn down serving individuals. That doesn't quite make sense. And it messes with your head as a provider. And so I want to try to get us back on track if possible, and maybe this will be helpful. So the things that I came up with in 2022, my goals, hopefully some of your goals, and some reality checks as a provider is first thing is to be honest under retention. of our staff. I think the focus should be on the retention of the people that we have now, because I think if we take care of the people now, that becomes a great environment that somebody may want to work in. And so instead of going out, well, we still have to go out there and try to recruit. But overall, if we take care of the people that we have, perhaps that may be a edge to get people to come work for us in the future. So first of all, be honest. Keep employees informed of the systemic changes in the system. Explain why these changes and regulations in general are in place. We often, think that we're not going to bother our staff with why different rules have come into place or new mandates, all that stuff. You know what? I'm taking a different tact on this. I'm going to tell them, and I'm going to be honest about even some of the stuff that sounds really screwed up, because there's a lot that sounds really screwed up. But I'm going to be honest with them because, more than ever, it goes to retention. If I can be honest with them, maybe they'll appreciate that and hang on with us. So a couple examples about being honest is explain the vaccine mandates and how it affects your organization or doesn't. If you're under the OSHA if you're not under the OSHA mandate because you don't have 100 employees, that means that you don't have to follow that particular mandate. If you have an ICF or a nursing home or some other home health care in some situations, you're under the mandate from the federal government. But if you're not under the mandate, I think it's still a good idea to explain to staff why it's in place and why the system is going this, being forced to do it. Mainly, to be honest with you, it's about getting everybody vaccinated so that we can get a handle on COVID. That's going to create some major problems for a lot of us because there are people who refuse to do the vaccine. But be honest. MRC and billing. You know what? It's confusing as hell. And I know that believe me, I've seen the state data from all of us providers that have provided our data over the past couple of years, and we're really screwing it up, guys. We're screwing up MRC, for example. We also don't do a real good job at billing. You know what? It's okay to, and I think we need to be honest with our staff about why it's important. Is don't hesitate to ask for help. Ask Hamilton County DDS to have somebody do a training with your staff. I mean, I think that there's nothing wrong with that. And if you don't understand MRC and if you're under MRC, ask for help because it is confusing. We have a lot of providers. I'm going to be real honest with you. We have a lot of providers around the state that are in some big trouble because they didn't follow MRC rules. And we need to get a handle on that. Documentation. One thing to explain to staff, being honest, is why it's important and how it provides a record for the great things they do, because it really does. I mean, it's time to brag, about the good things you've done, and that's why documentation is so important. It's not only a requirement, but it also can be a tool to help someone feel good about their job. Funding, we're a fee-for-service model, and I think we should explain to staff how the rate is developed and how it's supported by the state and just how our system is. Because if we can explain that to our staff, maybe they'll understand why we just can't give raises out of the blue. I know a lot of my staff don't understand that. So I think we need to be honest. I'm going to challenge you on that and just really take a different stance with your staff when it comes to explaining the system and how it works. Back to the hourly wage, it's directly related to the waiver rate and the market rate. What is the market rate? Well, I can't, if I had the money and if I could find the money, I can't pay $18 an hour for a DSP if every other provider in our area is paying 13? Now, we don't have the money to pay 18 bucks an hour, but if we did, there is a thing called the market rate, and we all need to know what are others paying, and we try to get a little bit better so we become more desirable to work for. But there is the waiver rate and the market rate. Explain that to your staff. Policies and procedures, make sure they are clear and meet Medicaid DOD standards, and explain the reasons behind those. We often throw at our staff all these policies and procedures and think they'll just read them. Well, you know what? They're probably not going to read them. And two, they probably don't understand them because we wrote them in a way that we may not even understand. Does that make sense? We write things we don't really understand ourselves. Explain how the system works, from how things, just from the feds onto the state, onto the county, onto the provider. Explaining that goes a long way to our staff, and it goes to retention. I really do believe the more we involve our staff, we put out weekly newsletters with all this information in. Hopefully they're reading it, and then we reinforce those when we can in staff meetings. But we're going to try to be as honest as possible. How quality of services directly relate to reputation of the agency, staff recruitment, client recruitment, and wage. An emphasis on quality of services and explaining to our staff what that means. What is quality services and how that helps with recruitment, retention, and hopefully getting the wage up to a livable wage for our staff. I think we need to define quality. We need to define and explain how it ripples through all those different areas. And then, of course, how quality assurance is not meant to be a gotcha. I know staff feel that way. I know we feel that way when outside entities such as the county or the state or the feds come in and do, look at our information we look at it as a gotcha kind of system. But in reality, internally in an organization, if you have a quality assurance program, meaning it's really just helping them to make sure that all this freaking paperwork and all the things that we are required to do is done correctly, so we don't have to worry about it. So those are some things I think focus on retention for staff is just being honest. As far as business principles and practices, just a couple things I think are really important. First of all, you are a business. I don't care if you are an independent provider, an agency provider, you are a business and you're responsible for following the laws and regulations. Here's one thing that always perplexes me. I've heard this before. Well, the county's not helping me with these various business principles, or they're trying to help me with these business principles. You know what? It's not their responsibility. If you are a provider, it's your responsibility. I think the county will help you. Of course they will, and give you advice. But we gotta remember when it comes to your business and your business practices, that's on you and on me. See, if you need help, with any part of your business practices, go seek professional advice. I think that's the best thing to do. As a business, your top priority is to have sound principles in place: accounting, policies and procedures for employees, HR practices that are based in employment law, which is wage and hour, unemployment, workers' compensation, insurance. Again, it's your responsibility. It's great that you got in the field. I think everybody's happy that you started a business or you're an independent provider or whatever. I think that's great, but got to remember you are a business and you're responsible for all these things. Billing is your responsibility. It is not the responsibility of the county board to make sure that you did your billing correct. We work in a great county and they'll help you, but it's really your responsibility. I told you some of the stuff would be pretty rough. But I think it's something, if as we start the next year and we look at our business, we got to come into it knowing our responsibility as a provider, the county's responsibilities, the state and the feds. And as long as we know that and and involve as many of our staff as possible, we have the opportunity of becoming a good, thriving business. I do believe that. Focus on ethics, another 2022 goal for myself and hopefully for others, or what I recommend for anybody in this business. Hey, you know what? Report your MUIs. You know, I'll hear reports of providers that I didn't have any MUIs this year. Are you freaking kidding me? You know, MUIs happen. They are part of being a provider, and make sure you're reporting them. It's the only way the system gets a little bit better, to be honest with you. Again, it's not a gotcha thing, but it's our responsibility as providers, as independent providers. It's our responsibility to follow that and report when an unusual incident happens, a major unusual incident happens. And yeah, we may have to deal with uncomfortable situations, but it's our responsibility. Don't skirt around the required training. It only gets you into trouble. All these things will get you into trouble if you don't follow it. Staff need to be trained. They need to be trained on the things that the department has put out. We can't get around it. We can't say it happened and it didn't happen. We have to focus on training. By being a provider, you agree to be regulated. It's just the way it is. I mean, if we want to be in this field, we have to understand that the county has a regulation responsibility, and so does the state. And it's part of being a provider. Instead of fighting it, you know, I try to look at it as a good thing. I want to see how we're shaping up. I want to see how our organization is holding to the requirements. Different way to look at it. This is going to be so rough, and I'm sorry, but I think it's this reality. We need to get out of this year and a half of survival and get back to what our responsibilities are as providers. If you can't keep a client safe, you shouldn't be the provider of that client. I'll say it again. If you can't keep the client safe, you shouldn't be the provider of that client. This is hard stuff, but we're doing a disservice to the individual if we cannot keep them safe and provide for them. And you'll hear philosophically people say, well, it's not really about safety. It's about, you know, what the individual wants. And it is. I get that. But the taxpayer doesn't get it. They expect us to keep people safe. That's the basic. And that's what we need to do. And we ask that question of ourselves all the time. Can we keep this individual safe? And if we can't answer it correctly, we're not going to be that provider. So two biggest areas of focus and refocus should be on the two biggest areas with our DSP staff, I believe, that should be the focus is medication disbursement. If we screw that up, we could really hurt somebody. We need to focus on that and refocus throughout the year. And then client funds. Unfortunately, client funds can get our DSPs into trouble. We need to explain to them right up front. These two areas, medication disbursement and client funds, are very, very important. And we need to make sure we're doing it correctly, or you could lose your job. Someone could get hurt. Be active in the provider community. You know, just because you're a provider of a couple individuals and, you know, it doesn't mean that you don't get involved in the community. We are a community of providers in Hamilton County, and we need to get involved and learn from each other. I think that only makes us better. Think before you complain. I like to say that all the time to county boards, providers, state, DOD folks. You know, we're good at complaining. But let's think a little bit before we do that. There's usually a reason why something is being done, and complaining doesn't help. It really doesn't in the long run. Asking for an explanation is a different way of doing it. Always review if you are set up to be the best provider you can be. So, we all should be wanting to be a better provider. We all should be wanting to be the provider the county goes to next. That's should be the goal of every provider. Our competition is not about how many clients we have or can I steal your staff, because that's really not the competition. What the competition really should be is, are we the provider in our county that everybody wants to be with? And I would encourage you in 2022 to figure out your goals and have that be the top part. How can I be the best provider I can be? Philosophy versus reality, and then I'll end, is we do need to practice empathy. Philosophy is meeting reality right now. Would we love to have every individual wants to live alone and have round-the-clock staff? Hell yeah, that would be awesome. And we should always strive for that if we can. The reality is we're not going to be able to provide it. And so so that means our models are a little bit bigger and than ideal. Well, if that's the way to keep people safe and provide services, we may have to do that. That kind of goes against philosophy. We have to empathize with those of us that have been in the field a while and have come up with concepts of philosophical concepts of how we want our field to go and where we want it to go. This whole pandemic, we have to empathize with those folks, including myself, because reality's hitting it right in the gut. We can't necessarily actualize all the things that we philosophize. And we just need to be understanding with each other on that. So those are my things. I think focusing on 2022, there's some hard stuff to think about for us as providers, but it's time because the pandemic probably doesn't have an end, and there probably also will be mandates. We could give up or we can keep going. And if we keep going, then we need to strive to be the best we can be. That's my message today. Be honest with your staff, and hopefully good things happen out of that. That's all I got, Eric.
All right. Thanks, Jamie. Good job. And all right, folks, we're in the last stretch here. We've got 17 minutes. And this last piece, I'm going to talk about families and staff and how we look at this a little differently. We have to start kind of in a tough place. So the identification is tough, right? But don't think it's going to be all gloomy. We've got real solutions. And again, we'll follow up today's spiel with real solutions. I think that's always important. You feel like, okay, well, you've cited the problem, but I do want to give a couple different scenarios. One of the things I'm involved with both local, national, and international allies, what we call ally support, right? From all over. And one of the things that has emerged across so many fields, DD, mental health, addiction services, and that, is that the entities that we would kind of put in that program coordination, case management circle, right, have been so bureaucratized. I'm talking all systems. I'm not just talking the DD system. What has happened that I'm asking everybody to really begin to really look at this, if you haven't experienced already, is that there is a gap, not an emerging gap. There is a gap now between the families and people served and that case management function. Case managers did not get in the field to be Medicaid verifiers, right? Case managers did not get in the field to to be the validators and verifiers of all things billing and documentation. That's not what people got into. People got into it to help people. And you can talk to case managers from any given field, and they'll tell you, I really wanted to serve people. I used to do this. I used to do that. Now I do this. And the now is often very, it falls in this kind of a thing. You can look at almost any system now, and their case manager, it has too many people on their caseload. And if they're a good case manager, they have even more than too many good people on their caseload, right? And then what has happened is that what they do is they assess clinically, right? They assess according to the person's deficits, if we're honest with ourselves, right? So we talk about person-centered, but again, if you really look at the function, people are assessing according to the person's needs and their deficits. They are writing a contract. No case manager likes to hear me say that, but they're writing a contract for services that identifies the providers, right? And other resources. They are authorizing those services. Okay, they're monitoring those services more and more limited, though, because of their big caseloads. And then ultimately they're billing, right? This is every system I know. Well, there's nothing wrong with that. If we were all consultants, and I ask you to really think that way, and we came into a system and they said, this is what this position does. Okay, we condemn, as Jamie pointed out, there are reasons for that. Right. And those things have to be, those are non-negotiable kinds of things right now that have to be. The problem is that what's happened is that we sucked out of that role. Okay. We evolved that role to be this more administrative. SSA stands for Service and Support Administrator, right? Administration, right? We never really thought the administration part was going to get as deep as it does. It's there, right? And again, so it's in the mental health system, it's in addiction services. So the point being is the gap for families, though, the things that you hear tried and true social worker case managers talk about they used to do, those did not go away. Hear what I'm saying? Those needs did not go away for families. And that's really what's so important here. And it is so clear. I'm in every circle, every social service you can think about, I'm involved in, and including racial and social justice. And I'm hearing this everywhere, right? The gap that has emerged for families is their needs didn't go away just because we bureaucratized those functions, okay? And so what is left is families and providers are now left then with the fallout from that, okay? Where I know, and let's use Jamie as an example, back in days when Jamie and I would have been maybe lower level social workers than our given positions, we would have kind of split the work. He as a provider would have said, I can do this. And I would have said, who's going to take so-and-so to the hospital? And I would say, well, I can do it today, Jamie. Is there any way you could pick him up when he gets out, right? This was the typical kind of, we weren't always happy about it, but that's what we did if we were good social workers, right? We kind of split that difference. Now there isn't a split. And so what's happening for families and the people served, okay, is that they are finding a lot of the needs that they have are just unmet, and even worse, that they're unanswered. And this is not the fault of the case managers, it is the fault of our systems, okay? And so we have to design, Don and I, Karen, those of us, we're working really hard to have real solutions, because I'm going to give it the most street sense that it has, the ground level that it has. Families now, if you talk to randomly, if this group here, if we picked out 100 families from all different systems, here's their story. Is that they call 2, 3, 7 numbers of people. They look at fancy brochures with all kinds of help numbers. They call those numbers and they talk to voicemail. They leave 3 or 4 voicemails and they don't hear back for 4 or 5 or 6 days, right? When they hear back, they have to tell the story all over again. Nothing's been achieved. There hasn't been information gained that really avails them of the solution. And too many times the problem, it hasn't gone away, but the issue's over with, like they can't do anything about it, right? And so families now are starting to give up on calling, or they're calling you because you're the one person they can trust regardless of your role. let me pick somebody out. So Patrick, I'm going to call Patrick Ober about my taxes. And Patrick's like, hey, I'm happy to help, but I don't do taxes. I know, but you're the one person I can get a hold of, right? How many have heard that? How many people have heard that? I know you have, right? Brian Jones, listen, I'm calling you about a croquet set that I wanted for my daughter. Well, now hold on a second. I don't mind helping you, but what do I have to do? Well, you're the one person I can get a hold of. I can get a hold of you. Okay. I hear this every single day. Okay. Every day, all day long. And for a while, and I want to admit this, I was really angry at given positions, right? But I found out it's not a single person or this, that. It is a systemic issue across all systems now. And what we need to recognize together, it is not the fault of case managers in and of themselves. Yes, we all know employees from every single position that could be better. But more than that is what I've discovered is, as Jamie kind of said, it is a position that's required to be. And those functions are required. But what we're going to have to do is we're going to have to build that. And so today's discussion, this little bit of time we have. So what's the result? How does that help? How do we help families? What's the solution there? And also staff. Okay. And so what we do is, we got to help four people. We got to help the person served. We got to help the family. We have to help the DSP program coordinator and our provider, and we've got to help our case manager. We got to help them. Everybody in this problem didn't design it themselves. Okay. We did not design it itself. It became about as a regulatory kind of system. So how do we resolve that, make that better? Here's what families want. It seems so simple. You're thinking, well, Eric, I don't need you to tell me that, but I can tell you. I told our family engagement specialist, Sean Bostic, I hired him. We had 119 people apply for his position. I hired Sean because his great strength in his interview was that he would be a great listener, right? And that was number one for me, a deep listener. Now, many people right now, and this is the part of the problem, we don't have the time to listen. And I really mean that. We really don't, right? And we'll talk about that in future sessions. How do we ensure time to listen? I have a Jewish family I serve who would not mind me sharing this. You are not talking to them for any less than 2 hours on any issue, because they have a lot of issues. And part of their culture, right, is there's a whole way. So if you think you're going to rush through a conversation just to get your DD thing met, I've got news for you. That's not going to work. And nothing's going to be heard. And there's going to be a lot of fallout from that, okay? Because you're not understanding their culture. You're not understanding who they are. So the point really is this. Here's what families, all that families want. I told Sean, if you will come aboard, because he was from the mental health system in DJFS, and you will do just these things, you'll be wildly successful. One, make the time to listen. And if you don't have the time to listen, make sure that in the time that you have to listen, you listen deeply and make a call back when you can listen. Number one. Two, get back with people on time. As silly as it seems, I'll tell you right now, if we're all busy. Nobody's more busy than everybody here, right? But get back with people on time. Families want status reports. They don't have to have the answer right now, as long as they know that you're taking care of the problem. So if you told them you get it done by Tuesday, right? Don't just leave it open-ended. Then get back with them Tuesday. Say, listen, I got a status report for you. Here's where we're at, right? And this I hear every day from families. They want a live person to talk to. They want to know the information that's most necessary. What is it that they can do? What is it that you're going to do? And if you're going to say it's somebody else, because it often is, using my example with Brian and Patrick, if you're not the croquet expert or you're not the tax expert, that's okay that you refer them. But please make sure that when you give them a number, somebody's actually going to answer on the other side. This seems so common sense, but I'm telling you, you will improve your family relations 1 billion times if A, you make sure they have the right information, 2, that they're getting a response, 3, that it's timely, and 4, if you can't do it, and I hear this is one of the most important things, don't overpromise people, right? But then don't say, well, I don't know what to do, and leave them hanging, right? Is make a commitment to find the right person and do what we call warm handoffs. So don't just simply send them to, hey, if I know if you call over at Social Security, they'll take care of it for you. That's not going to work, because again, going back to my premise, families have already called 7 people. They've already talked to 5, 6, 7 people and they're exhausted. So now they're frustrated. So guess when Brandy gets a call from Mrs. Johnson, now when the rest of us haven't followed through or given Brandy the heads up that's call coming, guess what? Brandy's going to have a whole day of incidents. It's going to be a full day. And what it does is it begins a domino effect across our system where it goes through 5, 6 different staff. The story gets bigger, the confusion gets greater, right? This is what families need. If you're serious about solving issues for families, it's little stuff. It's not big stuff, right? We do the big stuff pretty well. So again, those things are important. Now, the other thing is this, and this is my best tip for the day. When you listen, don't just ask families to give you their DD story. In other words, if you're calling to talk to a family about a pickup time or something like that, right? Be prepared. Understand when you call, you may have to make time for that family to listen to something bigger than the DD thing, because I can't tell you how many families need food right now, need a place to stay, aren't affording their rent. All these Maslow needs, very simple needs. And so I'm going to finish this part with a story. I talked to a mom that was very unhappy with Hamilton County DDS. So I went out and I knew that it was going to take some time. There was no rushing through the situation. It was time none of us seemed to have, but we had to make it. And so when I sat down with her, she goes, "Oh, honey, you just don't know all the problems I have with your agency." I said, "Well, I'm here to listen to those. Give them all." And she goes, "You're not ready for it." I said, "Well, I will be. Just give me all." She went on and she had about 10 issues that she was angry about. Only 4 of those were HCDDS issues. And honestly, guys, none of the answers from us were going to be solutions for her. Their family had some difficulty. They just were things that we could not give the answer that she wanted, no matter what, right? So I was using Jamie's point. I was honest with her about that. But I said, "Tell me about those other things." She goes, "What? The other things?" And she had, I won't bore you, she had a slew of things, some little, some big. And it was a Friday. And I said to her, "Ma'am, what if I could get 2 of those things done by Wednesday?" And she literally stopped all of her complaining and all of her anger. And she goes, "Which ones?" And I said, "I don't know, but I'll get 2 of them done by Wednesday." She goes, she breathed. I'll never forget this because I've used this over and over. She breathes and she goes, "That would be absolutely fantastic." Completely changed the relationship, right? And the 2 things I did were, one was big, one was little. I won't bore you with. One was so little it was ridiculous. Had nothing to do with DD. And this is what I'm finding right now in this time, that we're all struggling with lack of provider staff, lack of support. What I'm finding is it is hard. We don't seem to have the time. But if you will do those simple things and listen for little things that you can do that aren't just the DD things, I am telling you, you'll be wildly successful with families. So this is the same with staff. I've got 1 minute, so I'll say this. It's the same as staff. Right? Staff right now need their lives to be uncomplicated policies, uncomplicated procedures, uncomplicated functional things that they can do. So one of the things we'll talk about in the future is, can we do some job sharing, right? And can we, and this is what I'm doing, Don and I and Karen are doing, can we find allies, right? Whether we pay those allies or whether we swap. I'll do a presentation for you if you'll do this for us, kind of a thing. Can we use our allies around us, which are systemic allies, big ones like provider agencies and ACDS, which are medium nonprofits, and which are little nimble folks. Like I got a little church group that helps feed 700 people. It's crazy, right? So can we link up and fill each other's gaps, right? And so, for instance, a lot of these families that we get involved with that have needs, and our staff who have food needs, right? And we'll talk about it in the future. We're going to do a food pilot for staff. Okay. So we're going to do a food pilot for staff wherein we help staff get very nutritious, affordable food that they can order and get, every Friday or something, just because that makes their lives uncomplicated. So to wrap, it's this. First of all, make sure, find somebody to listen to that family. And just the little stuff. Two is make sure that when you're linking people, that they get the live people that really have answers. Get them the right information. And if that's going to take you 3 days, simply tell them that. I will get you that answer by Friday, and then make sure that you follow up. And then for staff, do the same thing. Uncomplicate your lives with better communication, right? Ask them what it is outside of just their job that would make things easier. Bring it back to this group or our allied provider group, and let's talk about what can we do to simplify and make life more affordable for our providers. Done.
Well, I want to thank you, Don's still on, but I want to thank everybody for coming to the first Northstar session. This is not going to be, this is going to be different from the provider group. Okay, this is about challenging each other, making each other better. I definitely want to end, and I think I speak for Eric. I know I speak for Eric and everybody from the county. Two is, thank you for being a provider. Now, let's be the best one we can be, and you hang in with the series. Maybe we'll help each other get to that goal. So, Don, do you want to say anything?
I just echo that. Thank you for all you do. Thank you for taking time out of busy schedules to be part of this discussion. And thanks, Jamie and Eric, for the messages. I mean, they're really right on. So we appreciate you so much. And we look forward, we'll be sending out invitations for early next year for a couple more sessions. So thank you all and have a wonderful day.